Hey guys, good evening, or perhaps a gentle good morning, wherever you might be in this big, wide world tonight, as the day winds down, or perhaps just before it begins to stir. Let's gently drift back into. We're going to explore a world far removed from our cushioned chairs and instant connections. So settle in, let your mind soften, and if you feel inclined, a gentle tap on that like button or a quiet subscribe helps these stories find more sleepy ear. Have you ever wondered what it truly felt like to drink water when you didn't know where the next drop would come from? Or perhaps to wake up to a sky so vast and silent it felt like the world stretched into eternity with only the sound of camel bells for company. Can you imagine the sensation of dust, fine as flour, clinging to your tongue, your teeth, every single breath, a gritty reminder of endless mind? Tonight, we're stepping into the remarkably unglamorous, yet utterly captivating, mysterious daily life of a Silk Road trader. We won't focus on grand battles or emperors, but on the small, persistent rhythms of their days, the taste of their meager meals, the ache in their bones after weeks on the move, the fleeting smells of faraway markets, and the quiet determination that drove them across continents. Let's begin our slow journey into their world. The caravan gathers, a dawn of dust and anticipation. Imagine for a moment you are there, not in a bustling airport with the clean, sterile stirl of jet fuel and recycled air. No, you are deep within the heart of an ancient caravanserai, a walled oasis in the pre-dawn hush of what could be Persia, or maybe the edge of the Chinese deserts. The first sensation that truly registers is the smell. It's a heavy, complex tapestry woven from 1,000 threads of daily life and ancient commerce. There's the pervasive, earthy tang of damp straw and dry mud from where animals have rested, mixed inextricably with the potent, musky scent of camel and horse. This isn't the faint animal smell you might encounter at a petting zoo. This is the deep, almost overwhelming aroma of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of large animals having spent the night in close quarters. You can almost taste it on the back of your tongue. Intertwined with this is the acrid, lingering smell of stale cooking fires from the night before, a ghost of wood smoke and scorched meat that seems to cling to every surface. But then, beneath that, a tantalizing counterpoint emerges the sharp, pungent aroma of strong spices from countless unpacked bales, perhaps the peppery bite of black pepper, or the warm sweetness of cinnamon, or the earthy robustness of cumin, all wafting from the piles of goods waiting to be loaded. This blend is almost intoxicating, a promise of distant lands, and inevitably the ever present smell of human sweat and bodies that haven't known a true bath in weeks or even months. It's a scent that's both distinctly human and oddly comforting in its familiarity, a testament to shared hardship. This raw, unadorned odor mixes with the dry, dusty scent of the ground itself, a fine powder that gets into everything, sometimes a faint, almost sweet whisper of dried dates or figs might drift by, a briefest, pleasant interlude in the heavier and sharper aromas. These smells don't just exist in the air, they cling to your rough wool tunic, to your hair, settling into the very fibers of your being, a persistent, invisible layer of the Silk Road itself. As your senses adjust to the symphony of smells, the sounds begin to emerge from the pre dawn quiet. It's not a sudden clamor, but a gradual, almost hesitant awakening. First, the deep, guttural grunts and groans of camels as they are roused and begin to be loaded. These aren't just noises, they are the very breath of the journey, a low, resonant thrum that vibrates through the ground beneath your feet. Each grunt seems to tell a story of annoyance or resignation, a slow, deliberate protest against the rising sun. Interspersed with this is the metallic clinking of chains and the gentle, rhythmic jingle of bells on the camels' harnesses. Each jingle is a tiny chime in the vast silence, marking the slow and steady progress of preparation. Then you start to hear the low murmurs of tired voices, men speaking in hushed tones, their words a blend of different languages you might not understand, but whose shared fatigue you can feel. The rustle of coarse fabric as men adjust their clothes or secure a pack, the soft scrape of a cooking pot being packed away, or the muffled thump of a heavy bale being set down for loading. Occasionally, the silence is broken by the sharp, insistent bark of a dog somewhere in the distance, or the distant, mournful bleating of goats from a nearby. These are the fleeting sounds of life on the very edges of human civilization. As the sky begins to lighten, the sky, almost imperceptible shuffling of sandaled feet on the dusty ground becomes more noticeable, a quiet procession of figures preparing for the long day ahead. Each sound, no matter how small, is a thread in the rich tapestry of the caravanserai's waking moments. As the first faint streaks of saffron and rose begin to paint the eastern sky, the visuals of the caravanserai slowly resolve from shadow into substance. In the dim, pre-dawn light, you can see the caravans forming, their immense shapes like slumbering beasts slowly coming to life. Figures, still mostly silhouetted against the brightening sky, move with a quiet, practiced efficiency. Each movement is deliberate, economical, honed by countless previous journeys. You might catch the faint glint of silk bundles as they are carefully lifted and lashed onto a camel's back, their tightly packed folds promising unimaginable luxury at their destination. Nearby, a potter might be meticulously securing his fragile wares, each piece wrapped in layers of coarse cloth and padded with straight. You can almost feel the texture of that rough burlap against your fingers, the warm, supple quality of camel leather on saddles that have known generations of riders. The ground itself is a canvas of subtle browns and ochres, a patchwork of undisturbed dust and freshly scuffed earth. For the trader himself, the morning ritual is stark in its simplicity. There's no elaborate washroom routine or freshly brewed pot of coffee. Instead, the first taste of the day is often that of dry, coarse bread, sometimes stale from days past, gnawed on to provide immediate sustenance. This is washed with brackish water, lukewarm and perhaps tasting faintly of the goat skin it was stored in, or even holding the metallic hint of an iron pot. The feel of their simple clothes against the skin is a constant companion. Rough wool or coarse linen, perhaps a bit damp from the night's clinging slightly in four places, defying geometry as you move. There's the fleeting chill of the desert morning that bites at exposed skin before the sun truly asserts its dominion. Personal hygiene is minimal. A quick splash of precious water from a communal basin, if it's available, is all that can be afforded. The sensation of yesterday's dust still clinging to your face and hair is an escape of fine powder that already promises to be renewed tenfold by midday. Amidst these sensory awakenings, the mental landscape of the trader is a quiet blend of anticipation and a subtle dread. There's the palpable hope of profit, the imagined feel of weighty silver or gleaming gold coins once the journey is complete. That hope is a fragile flame in the vastness of the unknown and can almost feel the reassuring or perhaps slightly worrying weight of a coin pouch against your hip, a constant reminder of the capital you carry and the risks you are taking. But hand in hand with this is the quiet, persistent awareness of the long days ahead. The sun will climb high, the dust will rise, and the path will stretch, seemingly without end. There are the dangers to consider, the unseen bandits lurking in the passes, the sudden and brutal sandstorms that can engulf an entire caravan, the scarce water sources, and the unpredictable whims of nature and fellow travelers. These thoughts aren't paralyzing, but are a quiet hum beneath the surface, a part of the daily calculus of survival. The caravanserai slowly empties as camel after camel is loaded and then rises with a groan and their immense shadows stretching long in the dawn light. The shouts are now louder, the commands sharper, and a shared sense of purpose permeates the one by one. The traders take their places, either on camelback or walking alongside their beasts to conserve the animal's strength and their own. And then, with a final collective movement, the caravan begins to the sturdy gates of the caravanserai swing open with a groan of aged wood, releasing this river of commerce into the vast, expectant landscape. The smells of the enclosure begin to fade, replaced by the clean, dry air of the open road, an air that already promises new sensations, new challenges, in the relentless march of another long day. Gaze on the dust-blown path, monotony and micro-sensations. Once outside the relative shelter of the caravanserai's walls, the true character of the Silk Road begins to assert itself. The very first and perhaps most persistent sensation is the unrelenting sun. It rises swiftly, a blazing orb in an impossibly clear sky, quickly shedding the desert's fleeting morning chill. By mid morning, it presses down with an almost physical weight, a tangible force that seems to flatten the very air around you. This isn't the gentle warmth of a summer's day in a temperate climate. This is a dry, intense heat that seems to leach the moisture from your skin with every passing moment. You can feel your throat begin to dry, a subtle scratchiness that will only intensify as the hours stretch onward. The blinding glare reflects mercilessly off the pale, shimmering sand or the stark, light-colored stone of the ancient pathway. Even with a head covering, the light feels aggressive, forcing your eyes to squint against the vast, bright expanse. The landscape seems to shimmer and dance at the edges of your vision, creating tantalizing yet frustrating mirages of water that are never truly there. And with the sun comes the dust. Oh, the dust. It is not merely dirt on the ground, it is a living entity on the Silk Road, stirred up by dozens of shuffling feet and the ponderous steps of laden camels. It rises in a persistent cloud that follows the caravan like a second shadow. This dust is as fine as flour, a powder that immediately begins to coat everything. You can feel it on your skin almost instantly, a dry, itchy film. It settles on your clothes, turning whatever color they once were into a uniform, dull brown or gray. But more intimately, and perhaps most annoyingly, the dust coats the inside of your mouth. Every swallow is a gritty experience. Your tongue feels perpetually furred, your teeth gritty to the tachi, and every single breath you take fills your nostrils and throat with fine, irritating particles. There's a constant and almost unconscious need to clear your throat, a perpetual tickle deep within your lungs that promises to linger for days, even weeks, after the journey. Your eyes too dready, as if tiny grains of sand have worked their way beneath your eyelids, a subtle irritation that never quite goes away. The entire caravan settles into a rhythm of the journey, a slow, ponderous gait set by the camels. This isn't the hurried pace of modern transport. It's a deliberate, almost meditative progression. The insistent creak of their saddles becomes the constant background score, a rhythmic groan of leather and wood under immense weight. Each creak is a soft protest against the burden, a low whisper that repeats thousands of times over the course of a single day. And with it, the gentle, almost hypnotic jingle of their bells continues, a constant, tiny melody that marks every step forward. Stirs for those walking alongside their beasts, The shuffling of human feet on the dusty ground creates its own soft percussion. Hour after hour, step after step, your feet lift and fall, raising tiny puffs of dust with each movement. Conversations are often in low tones, or more frequently, there are long stretches of silence, broken only by the whispering of the wind across the vast, empty spaces, or the rhythmic breathing of animals and men. The mind drifts, becoming attuned to the simple cadence of travel. The physical sensation of travel becomes deeply ingrained. If you are riding on camelback, the swaying motion of the animal becomes your world, a constant, rocking movement that can be both mesmerizing and subtly nauseating until your body adjusts. The persistent chafing of rough fabric against your skin is inevitable, particularly where your clothes rub against the saddle or your own tired legs. Small irritations become constant companions. There's a dull ache in the bones that begins early in the day and only deepens with each passing hour, a testament to the unyielding demands of constant motion. Your skin feels perpetually dry and cracked, especially on your hands and face, exposed to the relentless wind and sun. You can feel the subtle and not so subtle trickle of sweat down your back and forehead, mixing with the ever present layer of dust to form a gritty paste that adheres stubbornly. The scenery itself can be deceptively simple, yet profoundly grand. For days, you might travel across seemingly endless stretches of desert, a vast expanse where the horizon shimmers with the heat. The dunes themselves are a marvel, their colors subtly shifting from pale gold in the morning to fiery orange at sunset, each ripple sculpted by the unseen hand of the wind. There are no trees for shade, only the occasional tenacious scrub brush clinging to life. At times, the landscape shifts to stark rock formations, their jagged peaks and weathered cliffs rising abruptly from the flat plains, casting long, deep shadows as the sun moves across the sky. These silent sentinels have watched countless caravans pass by over millennia. The predominant sound in these vast spaces is often the whispering of the wind, a soft, continuous sigh that seems to carry the echoes of all who have walked these paths. Occasionally, a sharp, startling call of a desert bird might pierce the silence, a fleeting reminder of life in the seemingly empty expanse. Of meals on the go are a testament to necessity and resilience. There's little in the way of variety or luxury. Lunchy, often eaten quickly in the meager shade of a large rock or the side of a camel, typically consists of dried meat, tough and salt, requiring considerable chewing. This is paired with more of that hard bread, sometimes so dry it feels like limestone in your mouth, a stark contrast to the soft loaves of home. A few dried dates or other preserved fruit might offer a fleeting sweetness, a precious burst of concentrated energy. All of this is consumed with minimal ceremony and always with the ever present taste of dust mingling with every bite. No matter how carefully you try to shield your food, the fine particles seem to settle on everything, adding a constant, gritty texture. The most crucial element is water, carefully rationed, often lukewarm from its leather skin, and sometimes with a faint, earthy taste from the springs it was drawn from. In the evenings, after setting up camp, the warmth of a shared meal around a smoky fire becomes a rare comfort, the flickering flames momentarily pushing back the vast darkness of the desert night. Oasis and caravanserai, brief reprieve, constant vigilance. After days or even weeks of unbroken travel across an empty world, the sight of an oasis or a distant caravanserai on the horizon brings an immense and profound sense of it's a feeling that washes over you like the promise of cool water on parched skin. The tired eyes that have squinted against the glare for so long finally have a focal point, a solid structure emerging from the shimmering air. As you draw closer, the silence of the open road begins to yield to the distinct and growing sounds of human activity. You hear the low hum of many voices speaking in various tongues, the familiar animal calls of other caravans already settled, perhaps the distant metallic clanging of metal from a blacksmith's forge, or the rhythmic pounding of a craftsman at work. Then, suddenly, a vibrant burst of green appears against the monotonous desert brown, the date palms of the oasis, their fronds swaying gently in the breeze, a visual promise of precious water and brief respite. The smells upon arrival are an overwhelming and often chaotic blend, a stark contrast to the sparse aromas of the open path. The first wave is the pervasive mix of stale sweat and strong cooking odors. The air is thick with the rich, savory scent of roasted meat mingling with the sharp, sometimes acrid fragrances of countless unfamiliar spices being cooked or traded. Perhaps the fiery perfume of dried chili, the pungent warmth of ginger, or the earthy sweetness of turmeric. These are not delicate aromas, they are robust, filling the very lungs. Beneath this, you detect the deep, unmistakable smell of fresh dung and urine from the many animals within the enclosure. You, a constant and unavoidable reminder of the sheer volume of life gathered in this space. But then there's the incredibly welcome scent of damp earth from the wells and fountain, a cooling and refreshing aroma that cuts through the dust and the heavier human scents. Mixed with this might be the slightly stagnant smell of standing water in a nearby pool, or the sharper tang of metal from tools and cooking vessels. A fleeting whisper of exotic perfumes or fragrant oils drifts by, a tantalizing hint of luxury carried from distant land, making the caravanserai a true cacophony of smells, each vying for attention, each telling a story of its origin and journey. The caravanserai isn't just a feast for the nose, it's a living, breathing symphony of human and animal sounds. The overriding cacophony is the clamor of bargaining, a rhythmic back and forth of voices rising and falling as traders haggle over prices. You hear the sharp, piercing cries of vendors hawking their wares, each call distinct and designed to cut through the general din. This is a place where countless unfamiliar languages mingle, creating a constant, undulating babble that washes over you. The bright, uninhibited laughter of children playing in the courtyard might suddenly punctuate the background hum, followed by the sharp, sometimes heat tone of an argument breaking out between two merchants over a disputed price or a perceived slight. The satisfying clatter of coins being counted or exchanged becomes a frequent sound, a small metallic affirmation of business being done. And amidst all this, you might hear the rhythmic beat of a distant drum from a storyteller gathering an audience, or the plaintive, mournful notes of a lute or other stringed instrument, providing a gentle counterpoint to the everyday bustles. It's a rich, layered soundscape, a true reflection of a crossroads where the world converged. The temporary shelter offered by the caravanserai is a welcome respite, though far from luxurious. The walls are typically of rough, sun baked mud brick or sturdy, rough hewn stone, providing a sense of solidity after the fleeting camps of the open desert sand. There's a noticeable and immensely welcome coolness, the thick walls insulating against the brutal midday heat outside. The floor is often simply packed earth, sometimes covered with simple, worn mats woven from straw or reeds. This is a shared space with traders and their goods, often packed in close proximity to strangers from far off lands. You can feel the subtle vibrations of footsteps from the next alcove, or hear the quiet rustling of another traveler turning in their sleep. Despite the walls, there is often a persistent presence of insects and vermin. Flies buzz lazily, and the quiet scurrying of unseen creatures might be heard in the darker corners. True, undisturbed sleep is a luxury rarely found, even within these temporary havens. For the trader, the caravanserai is a marketplace, a place where the arduous journey finds its temporary and sometimes rewarding purpose. The meticulous process of trade begins with the careful unwrapping of goods. Each bale of silk, once tightly bound against the elements, is slowly and deliberately unfurled, revealing its lustrous folds. You can almost feel the smooth, cool sensation of the silk slipping through your fingers, a stark contrast to the coarse fabrics you wages. Spices are poured from their sacks onto small weighing scales, their intense aromas momentarily overpowering the general caravanserai scent. Ceramics and precious metals are inspected with a keen eye, assessing their quality under the shifting desert. The hands on, tactile experience of these goods is paramount. The fine grain of a polished jade artifact, the rough texture of a sack of peppercorns, or the delicate fragility of a piece of blown glass. Then comes the dance of haggling over prices. This is an art form in itself, a subtle and often protracted negotiation that can last for hours. The tension of negotiation is almost tangible, a delicate balance between polite persistence and firm resolve. Every gesture, every inflection of voice holds meaning. The fleeting expression on a fellow trader's face can reveal more than words. The weighing of gold or silver in the hand feels heavy with significance, a direct connection to the value of your efforts and your risk. This intricate exchange builds a fragile trust or lack thereof between strangers from disparate lands. Beneath the surface of commerce and temporary peace, there is always the unspoken threat of disease, and illness is a casual, accepted part of life. On the road, a cough in the night or a feverish brow is met with resignation, not alarm. The primitive medicine available might involve herbal poultices or ancient remedies passed down through generations, but true healing is often left to fortune. And despite the walls and shared numbers, the constant threat of banditry or petty theft is ever present. Goods are carefully guarded, eyes are kept on strangers, and the feeling of vulnerability lingers even within these supposedly safe haven. True safety is a concept that exists only fleetingly. For the Silk Road trader, a precious commodity as rare as the finest Chinese silk. Every night is a quiet act of vigilance, even in slumber. Encounters and exchanges, a tapestry of cultures. As the caravan continued its slow, persistent journey, one of the most remarkable and often understated aspects of the Silk Road was the sheer diversity of people a trader would encounter. Imagine stepping into a bustling market where faces from a dozen different regions mingled, the sun darkened skin of a Central Asian nomad, the finer features of a Persian merchant, the broad countenances of a Chinese dignitary, or the piercing eyes of a Sogdian trader. Each person carried the subtle marks of their homeland in their clothing, their gait, and even the way they carried their clothing itself was a visual story of climate and tradition. The flowing, lightweight cottons of warmer climes, the heavy felted wools of mountain dwellers, or the exquisitely embroidered silks that were the very reason for many of these journeys. You'd observe the distinct facial features that marked different ethnicities, from the angular faces of nomadic horsemen to the rounderissimo serene visages of those from agricultural valleys, and of course, the babble of their languages was constant, a vibrant and confusing tapestry of sounds. But beyond the superficial, the Silk Road was a conduit for an incredible flow of ideas, arguably more profound than the goods themselves. Traders didn't just exchange silk for spices, they exchanged stories, passing along news and rumors from distant courts and far off battles. You might hear of the rise of a new emperor in the east or the fall of a kingdom in the west, the information traveling slowly, imperfectly, but relentlessly from mouth to ear. More significantly, religious beliefs traveled these very same pathways. The dainty teachings of Buddhism spread from India into China, its serene iconography leaving its mark in cave temples carved into cliffs. Later, the powerful and unifying message of Islam moved westward, carried by traders and scholars along. You might encounter followers of ancient Zoroastrianism with their reverence for fire or the subtle complexities of Manichaeism. These weren't aggressive conversions. Rather, they were quiet, continuous exchanges of faith and philosophy. Beyond beliefs, the Silk Road quietly moved technologies and artistic styles across vast distances. The techniques from making exquisite paper originating in China slowly made their way westward, transforming how knowledge was recorded and disseminated. Similarly, the art of glassmaking, refined in the Roman and Byzantine empires, influenced craftsmen far to the east. You might observe a newly arrived merchant carefully examining a piece of metalwork, wondering at its intricate filigree, or hear a quiet discussion about the properties of a new dye or pigment. The caravanserai was a place where the practicalities of trade often led to the sharing of subtle but powerful knowledge. The distinctive blue of Persian ceramics might appear in designs much further west over time, or the motifs of Buddhist sculpture could blend with local artistic traditions. These weren't grand imperial decrees of cultural exchange, but organic, almost invisible influences carried by the very currents of commerce and human interaction. And then there were the foods of the road, a constantly shifting culinary landscape. After days of dried meat and hard bread, arriving at a new caravanserai or town meant the chance to taste something wonderfully unfamiliar. You might encounter rich, slow cooked, spiced stews, their aromas of tender meat and fragrant herbs wafting tantalizingly through the air. The sweetness of pastries made with honey and local nuts would be a rare treat. Each region offered its own particular variety of bread, from the thin, crisp flatbreads baked on hot stones to denser, richer loaves leavened with sourdough. The act of eating was often a communal nature, sharing a meal from a common pot with fellow travelers, even if your languages didn't quite meet. Sometimes, of course, the local fare might be unappetizing to your palate, perhaps too sour, too fatty, or simply too strained. Sound. Regardless, it was sustenance, a vital and often intriguing part of the journey. Amidst this swirling mosaic of cultures, the challenges of communication were constant and often deeply frustrating. Imagine trying to negotiate the price of a precious cargo when the only shared words are a handful of basic phrases and a reliance on elaborate hand gestures. The simplest transaction could become a drawn out charade filled with misunderstandings and occasional bursts of laughter or exasperation. Many traders would learn a smattering of key phrases in various trade languages, a patchwork of vocabulary that allowed for survival and commerce. Yet, even then, the nuances of a deed, the subtle implications of a promise, or the true meaning of a local custom might be lost. Sometimes an interpreter would be found, a vital bridge between worlds, but relying on a third party introduced its own layer of complexity and potential for error or deception. A slight frown, a quick glance between native speakers could hint at a hidden meaning you might never truly grasp. Despite being constantly surrounded by people, the inherent solitude of the trader was a quiet, persistent companion. You were always on the move, far from home and the familiar comforts of family and long standing friendship. Brief connections were formed with fellow travelers during a shared meal or a long stretch of the road, momentary bonds forged in shared hardship. But inevitably, paths would diverge, and these fleeting friendships would dissolve, leaving you once again to your own thoughts in the quiet company of your camels. The long, empty hours on the road were filled not just with the relentless sun and dust, but also with introspection. What were the thoughts that filled the mind of a trader during these vast stretches of silence? Perhaps calculations of profit and loss, worries about the safety of their cargo, or longing for the familiar faces of loved ones left behind. The solitude was not always lonely. Sometimes it was a rare opportunity for reflection, to connect with the vastness of the world and the quiet strength within oneself. The success and even the very survival of a Silk Road trader often hinged on seemingly few mundane details of engineering and craftsmanship. Consider, for instance, the humble yet incredibly important ancient locks that protected their precious whaley. These weren't the sophisticated tumblers of modern times, but often simple, sturdy mechanisms of bronze or iron. Imagine the feel of that cold, heavy metal in your hand, the solid clunk as the bolt slid into place, a reassuring sound that promised at least a measure of security for your livelihood and your each lock had its own particular stubbornness, its own subtle trick to open, known only to its owner, a tiny piece of mechanical ingenuity that allowed the vast network of trade to function. Then there were the ancient bridges, crossings over treacherous ravines or surging rivers. These were not feats of modern architectural steel and concrete, but often rough hewn stone arches or sturdy wooden span built with a profound understanding of basic physics and local materials. You would feel the slight vibration beneath your feet as the caravan began its slow and careful cross, the distant rush of water echoing up from below, the rough texture of the stone underfoot, perhaps worn smooth by countless previous travelers, or the creak of aging timber might be your only companions as you traversed a chasm. These bridges stood as quiet monuments to human perseverance, unglamorous but utterly vital arteries of the Silk Road, allowing the continuous flow of goods and ideas to persist across a vast and challenging world. The return journey, weariness and reflection. As days turn into weeks and then months, the Silk Road trader begins the long, slow arc of the return journey. The landscape might feel both familiar and subtly changed, viewed through eyes that have seen much and grown accustomed to the vastness of the world. That the most immediate and satisfying difference is the shift in burden. No longer are the camels laden with heavy bales of raw silk or bulky pottery. Instead, their packs are now filled with the lighter yet far more valuable earned coins, the clink of silver, or the dull weight of gold, signifying successful transactions. Or perhaps they carry newly acquired treasures, a small, exquisitely carved jade figurine, a handful of rare, fragrant spices, or bolts of finely woven foreign cloth. Each item is a quiet testament to the journey's purpose. Yet, even with the prospect of profit, the pervasive sensation for the trader is one of profound fatigue. It's a weariness that settles not just in the muscles, but deep within the very bones. Weeks of relentless exposure to the elements, inconsistent sleep, and the constant alertness required for survival have taken their your shoulders might ache with a dull, persistent throb. Your feet feel heavy and callous, and a general lassitude makes every step feel like an effort. As you travel, familiar stretches in reverse, subtle sensory memories of the tabomed journey begin to surface. The dry air still carries the faint scent of dust and animal musk, but now it feels like an old and weary friend. The sun's heat is still intense, but your skin has toughened, accustomed to its touch. You might encounter the very same small insect buzzing lazily around a sparse desert plant, tiny visual echo of weeks ago. The, the taste of different waters from various springs and wells lingers in your memory, each with its distinct earthy or mineral notes. The wind that whips at your clothes is now a familiar companion, its constant presence, both a mild irritation and a comforting reminder of the vastness you have traversed. These are not new sensations, but rather the deepening of an experience that has now woven itself into the very fabric of your being. As the days grew shorter or the seasons subtly shifted, the trader began to experience the quiet joy of recognizing landmarks along the path now traveled in particular strangely shaped rock formation that had seemed alien on the outward journey now felt like a welcoming signpost, a distinct bend in a winding river, or the familiar silhouette of a distant mountain range against the setting sun would stir a quiet thrill of recognition in the weary heart. This wasn't just about navigation, it was about the subtle shift from the unknown to the familiar, a gentle easing of the constant vigilance that defined so much of the journey. The very air might feel different as you neared your own region, perhaps carrying the faintest scent of familiar vegetation or the dampness of a specific local climate. Every mile traversed was a step closer to the quiet comfort of home. And with that closeness, the dreams of home would grow more vivid, more insistent. Imagine the pervasive longing for a truly warm bed, not a rough mat on a caravanserai floor or a thin blanket under the open sky. The simple luxury of uninterrupted sleep, safe within familiar walls, would be a powerful driving force. You'd yearn for familiar food, the taste of a meal prepared by a loved one's hands, untainted by desert dust or the strangeness of foreign spices, the scent of your own hearth fire, the sound of your family's voices, even the comforting presence of a pet left behind would fill your quiet thoughts during the monotonous daytime hours, and in the stillness of these simple comforts, once taken for granted, now shimmered like precious mirages in the mind's eye. Yet, even in the final stretch towards home, the unspoken dangers, the knowledge of close calls from previous legs of the journey, linger. like the memory of a sudden sandstorm or a suspicious encounter that ended without incident but could have easily gone. The stories heard from other traders about those who weren't so lucky, caravans lost to the desert's fury or attacked by opportunistic raiders were a constant undertone to the quiet anticipation of arrival. The weight of newly acquired wealth also brought its own anxieties. The closer to home, the more tempting a target you might become. The continuous awareness of risk never truly left until the final safe passage through familiar gates. As the caravan enters the final stretch, the sun, which has been your relentless companion for so long, begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the familiar landscape. The fading light brings with it a deep, almost overwhelming feeling of physical exhaustion. Every muscle in your body protests, your eyelids feel heavy, and the quiet hum of your own fatigue fills your ear. The days and nights of travel have culminated in this profound weariness, a deep-seated tiredness that only true rest can alleviate. Yet, despite this exhaustion, there is a renewed surge of a determination, a final push towards safety. The anticipation of arrival is a powerful motivator, urging your tired feet onward. You fix your gaze on the outline of your hometown or the familiar walls of the final caravanserai, now visible in the twilight. The sounds of the town, perhaps children's voices, the distant braying of a donkey, or the smell of familiar cooking fires, begin to drift on the evening breeze, pulling you closer. Finally, with a collective sigh of relief from both man and beast, the caravan passes through the familiar gateway. The journey is not merely over in miles, but in the deep and visceral sensation of having the dust of distant lands still clings to your clothes. The ache in your bones persists, but there is a quiet triumph in the air. You have faced the vastness and the dangers, and you have returned. Conclusion: a gentle landing, and so our quiet journey into the daily life of a Silk Road trader gently concludes. We've lingered on the smells of damp straw and distant spices, felt the grit of dust on our tongues, and heard the rhythmic creak of camel saddles under an endless sky. It was a life filled with profound hardship, certainly, but also with quiet perseverance and the subtle triumphs of connecting disparate worlds. This wasn't a story of kings and conquerors, but of the ordinary men and women who walked the path, carrying not just silken spices, but also whispers of new ideas, new technologies, and the ever-evolving tapestry of human experience. They were the silent storytellers of their age, their footsteps echoing across millennia, creating a bridge between yesterday and today. As you drift into your own peaceful slumber, perhaps you can imagine that faint rhythmic jingle of camel bells in the distance, a lullaby carried on the ancient desert winds. May your own journey, whether across continents or simply into the realm of dreams, be filled with a gentle curiosity and a quiet sense of peace. Sweet dreams, and until next time.